Okay, so the larynx, also as the voice box, has two folds. The vestibular folds is the falx one that sits on top, and underneath is the vocal cord. Now, earlier I showed you this idea. So imagine that there is a cord that is start from here to the thyroid cartilage. Okay, so just a string there. Now, if the two middle finger comes together like this, you can go like this. We call this is adduction. If it goes like out, there's abduction. Okay, like this. This is adduction. This is abduction. So in the adduction, you bring the two vocal cords together as air from underneath pass to is vibrate, and it's going to create more sharp sound, like I see note, right? But in the abduction, like this, and it's going to vibrate. It's going to smooth like a B flat, like very white kind of sound. Doesn't sound like very white, but the low pitch sound in the abduction. This is due to this intrinsic muscle. I'm going to show you a little bit that leads to either adductions or abduction. And while the extrinsic muscle is really only involved in swallowing. Right? All right. So here are the vocal cord. All right, vocal cords. Remember that these vocal cords are underneath this. Okay, here's the vestibular fold. It's superior, and the vocal cord is underneath. What's the question here? Let me see. When we have sinusitis, is the fact that the ear too? Yeah, sinusitis can also go up to the eustachian loop, eustachian tube, and the eustachian tube is part of the middle part of the ear. Yeah, it can also affect that too. Okay. Yes. So remember that again, vocal cord is inferior below the vestibular fold, right? So one more time, vocal cord is inferior to the vestibular fold. The vestibular fold, also known as the falx, this right here is known as the falx vocal cord. Right. The true one is a true one. Okay, so that's there you go. Okay, right there. Okay, so abduction versus adduction, and you can see here is that in the muscle here, we'll call it the lateral. Remember, you guys, when you guys study muscle, that the origin is a cricoid and the insertion is a retinoid. In this case, right here. Okay, so it's cricoid. This triangle is the cricoid. Arytenoid. So it would be oh yeah, sorry. The origin is here. This is the immovable, and it starts from here, the cricoid, which is the most inferior. It goes up to the arytenoid here, and so when this contract, this is going to lead to. Sorry. So when this is contract, you're going to lead to the adduction. Okay. On the other hand, this muscle back here, it also has cricoid, arytenoid. So this is the origin, and this is the insertion. But when these muscles here, the posterior contract, right? It's almost like the thumb is coming together. If the thumb's going together, the index finger here and here is move apart. So the vocal cord is attached to this thyroid cartilage, or at least what opens up, known as the adduction. I don't know how I'm going to write this exam over here, but maybe something about abductions and adduction. Whether, okay, maybe it's related to cricoid, arytenoid, or the lateral, posterior or lateral. Maybe things like lateral arytenoid contraction will lead to adduction, whereas the posterior cricoid contraction will lead to abduction. So maybe something like that. Okay? But that's how one could generate different sound from either high note or a very low note. And of course, as you can, air is from here underneath, right? Air is from underneath right here, and it's coming through. And it's the diaphragm that contracts as it abdominal muscle. If you can control how much of that air comes in, and you control these muscles, right, you can create, different sound, and you can sing very well, and you can be like Beyonce, and you can make billions of dollars, known as Queen Bee, I guess. All right. Okay, so again, shows you the vestibular fold, the false vocal cord versus the true one underneath. Okay. And make sure you know which one are paired cartilage, and which one is the unpaired cartilage of the vocal cord. So from the larynx, it goes into the trachea, which is this part right here, and there is 20 C-shaped cartilage. And the last cartilage you see here is known as carina, the carina over here. Okay. Sometimes you go to, you have money and you want to go nice place to eat a steak, like Peter Luger's in Brooklyn. And you eat a nice piece of steak and someone is telling you a joke and you're laughing, and a piece of meat gets in the respiratory tract that block this passageway. You're choking. You can choose to, what you do is you can do a Heimlich maneuver, which means that you want it to, okay. Okay, so Heimlich maneuver is like basically you get under the person and you kind of push it up. So the idea is that you want this diaphragm to go up, right? So then this pressure, all the pressure in here, you're going to increase is the intrathoracic, alveolar pressure. You want it to increase, and hopefully is to pop that out. Okay? And if you're at home and you wanted to do your own cell Heimlich maneuver, you can find the corner of the table and just like fall on it. Maybe it helps it. Or the other way, if you know what you're doing, you can do a MacGyver maneuver. Right? MacGyver. He started to do, you can make simple things with the paperclip. So a MacGyver maneuver for me is that, let's say, you can put a hole right here, between the cartilage, right? And then put a pen so that the guy can breathe. This is known as the tracheotomy. So just put a puncture there. And then put the pin there and then super glue it together. That's the trachea. Okay, so it has 20 C-shaped cartilage. So this is basically, so it'll be like this. So if you do a sections of the trachea, this is the anterior, and this is the posterior. So this is the cartilage that you see here, cartilage like that. And there are chondrocytes in here. These will be pseudostratified epithelium here. But in the posterior, there's a muscle here called trachealis muscle. Okay? And that sits next to the posterior of the trachea is the esophagus. That's the esophagus. So if she's swallowing a bolus of food, this thing can expand and it push outward into the trachea, but that's fine because there's muscle here. That's a trachealis. You can see. Okay. Okay. And in the trachea, you can see that here's a trachea cross section. Okay. This is the sagittal sections of the trachea. Sagittal section. And you can see here's pseudostratified, but this is a mucus. Oh, here's a nice trachealis muscle. And you can see here is that there's mucus all along this. And oftentimes, if you breathe something that get into the trachea, this thing's right here with the muco, we call this muco-escalatory mechanism, right here, the mucociliary escalator mechanism, which allows the cilia to move up with the trap particle, and then you can basically sweat posteriorly so they can swallow it. And sometimes, if you have something here is irritated, right? What you could do is that you can cough like this to clear that, and that's coughing. And the way that you cough is that okay. I don't know. Let's see. Okay, so the way that you cough, what you can do is the first thing you do is you close down on this epiglottis. Okay, so this thing is going to go down. Okay, you close it up, and you're going to create a lot of intra-thoracic cavity, high pressure. Right, you're going to generate it high, and all of a sudden you just open up this, and all that bus of air will go through that create coughing. Okay. So that's what coughing is. I don't know. Give me a second. Okay, give me a second to see if I can find a syringe. Okay, never mind. I thought I could have a syringe, but I was going to do this demonstration that, let's say this is a syringe, right? This is the plunger. What you're going to do is you're just going to go hold down on this, and then you're going to push this plunger toward the air, the nose part right here. All right. You want it to go that way, and it's one of the Boyle's laws that if the volume is decreased, the pressure is going to increase. Okay, so you're just going to push this, but you just close on it, and all of a sudden, if you let that go, you will hear a pop sound. All right, you can do that at home, and that pop sound is very similar to coughing. And that you close down on the epiglottis, you create a lot of intrathoracic pressure, and you let it go, and it goes a poop, coughing. Similarly, if you have irritation up here, you sneeze, right? And that is trying to clear that debris particle out of your nose. Okay, so moving downward, you can see the air move from the trachea into the primary bronchus. How many primary bronchi you have? Two. Each of the primary bronchus goes into the lung. So this you can see right lung, and you can see left lung here. And you can see how in the right lung it's more straight, more vertical than in the left lung. There's an angle there, and that is because the positions of the heart would be sitting here. Okay, so it's part of the dichotic, where is part of the cardiac notch. And so if you inhaling particle that goes in, most of the time, because this is more straight, it's going to go into the right lung. All right, so you can get infection in the right side of the lung more than the left hand side, because this is more of an angle and this is more straight. Okay. All right. Primary bronchus. Primary bronchus then branches into secondary bronchus. How many secondary bronchi you have altogether? You have 5. Each of them goes into the lobe. So here's one lobe, superior lobe. Here's the middle lobe. And here's the inferior lobe. There's 3 lobes on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you have the superior lobe, and you have the inferior lobe. So there only 2. Each of the secondary goes into this lobe. So in fact, secondary bronchus is also known as lobar bronchus. Okay. Then you see called tertiary. And you see here it's called tertiary bronchus. Each of the tertiary bronchus goes into a bronchopulmonary segment. Again, one more time. Each of the tertiary bronchus goes into a bronchopulmonary segment. All right. So just like the secondary bronchus is known as the lobar, right? This is also known as the lobar. That's this one is known as the lobar. The tertiary is known as the segment bronchus, because each one of them goes into the bronchopulmonary segment. So this is known as the segmented bronchus. And then further branching goes into the terminal bronchial, and then to whoever question is, where does it begin and where does it end? The terminal bronchial is the end of the conduction division. It's the end of the conduction division. Okay. And where does the respiratory division begin? Respiratory divisions begins at the respiratory bronchial that you see here. Okay, this is the beginning of the respiratory division. Okay, and then you can see it's following all along respiratory bronchial into the alveolar duct and nice alveoli. Okay, and then what you see is that the pulmonary arteries become pulmonary arterial, pulmonary capillary, going to go surrounding this. Deoxygenated blood, and then come here as pulmonary vein, become oxygenated blood. And I show you already, nice to know, secondary bronchi is known as lobar, tertiary is known as segment or segmental bronchi. You have 10 on the right and 10s on the left, but they're fused together, so then you have between 18 and 20. This is known as bronchopulmonary segment. Okay. Each of the tertiary goes into a bronchopulmonary. What does a bronchopulmonary segment look like? It looks like this. Okay, here's one bronchopulmonary segment, a white one. Here's a blue one. Here's a red one. Here's a yellow one, and green one. And this is the individual, you can say tree or branches of the tree, so that if, a person has small cell carcinoma in this one bronchopulmonary segment, you can actually remove this right here. You can remove this. And it doesn't interfere with the other one, not so much. Or you can, in the case of the white one, you can remove this. But you can see how here, this will be your tertiary bronchus because it goes into a bronchopulmonary segment. All right, and then it's branches. Probably up to here is where you see terminal bronchial or a respiratory bronchial. And so that's your tertiary bronchus. Remember, each of the tertiary bronchus goes into this area, bronchopulmonary segment. So bronchial, further divisions or so, terminal bronchioles, the end of conduction division again. I'm kind of tired saying this. Respiratory bronchiole is the beginning of the respiratory division. Okay. Can gases exchange here in the bronchiole? Yes, they can. Yes, gases exchange do occur. Gases exchange do occur starting from the respiratory bronchiole. Not a lot, but there are some. Okay, and it goes into alveoli ducts and alveoli. We're just checking to see where we are. How good are we? Okay, we're doing pretty good. How many slides are there altogether? Oh, maybe we are slow. Okay, the pleural membrane is a serous membrane that is surrounding the lungs, the pleural. Okay, and let's say, for example, the functions of the pleural is actually because there's a serous fluid, it allows the lungs to inflate and deflate without much friction, if you will. The pleural membrane is also compartmentalized, and that is, let's say, for example, if this is the right lung and this is the left lung, the pleural membrane that is surrounding this, okay, is separated from this pleural membrane on this side. It should be closer, but all right. The idea is that this membrane right here surrounding this on this side, okay, it separates us on this side. It's independent of each other. So by compartmentalizing, meaning that if you have infections on the right hand lung, it doesn't interfere with this on the left hand side. Okay, but there in here, the pressure is slightly lower. In here in the lung, the pressure, we can calculate the measure of the pressure that you see in the lung, called 1 atmospheric pressure. Let's say, for example, one atmosphere's pressure is about 760 millimeters of mercury. Right? That you see there, but in the pleural cavity, which is here, the pressure is slightly lower. Let's say it's 756 millimeters of mercury. Right?
Yeah.
It's lower. So then there's a different. The different here is known as transpulmonary pressure. Transpulmonary. Whoever had the microphone, can you turn caller 5256? Can you turn off your microphone? I think on the phone was maybe star 69. Try that. That will turn off, so you're gonna get the feedback. Okay. So what happened is that, oh, good, you turn it off. Because there's a difference in the pressure, transpulmonary pressure, and it's negative, air tends to move from an area of high to the area of low, right? So that will help air to inflate. I mean, sorry, this will help as air moving out. It will help with the lung inflation, inflating. If there is no, transpulmonary pressure, zero, right? So how does that zero? Well, if you go up, like again in the Bronx, someone stabbed you right here in the rib cage, right between the crossed rib. Now the air can go in from the outside in. So then the air that you see here is the same as this in the lung. Then there is zero transpulmonary pressure, right? Then you cannot help but inflate. And then what you do is you're going to get a collapsed lung. And the collapsed lung is known as pneumothorax. And that's just one of the conditions that oftentimes leads to considers atelectasis. Okay. You don't need to know atelectasis. All right, the pleural membranes surrounding the lung. Okay, and so here is where respiratory. This right here is respiratory bronchial. This is right here is respiratory bronchial. Bronchial, respiratory, and then here's your alveolar duct. Okay, alveolar duct. As you can see here is that this respiratory bronchial has this little membrane, so you can have gases exchange occurs in the respiratory bronchial. Here's your terminal. Here's your respiratory. Oh, here's a good respiratory bronchial. They have this, and then of course you have your alveolar duct, which is also have gases exchange occur as well. And here's the alveolus. Okay, the cells that is involved in gases exchange is this right here. Okay, it's known as type 1 alveolar cell. Right here, this cell's right here, type 1 alveolar cell. See how the type 1 alveolar cell is part of this called respiratory membrane. What are the three components of the respiratory membrane that you need to know? One is the type 1 alveolar cells. This area here called the basement membrane. Two is the basement membrane. Okay, and then you have this right here. It's called endothelial cell, and that's the endothelial cells of the blood vessel, right? So that's three component right there. Type 1 alveolar cells, the basement membrane, and the endothelial cells of the blood vessel. That constitute the respiratory membrane. So in this case, gases exchange between the blood and the lung. What do we call that? Is that internal respiration or is that external respiration? Fang, no, that's not internal respiration. Right? That's no, Astra, that is not. That is external respiration. Okay, so again, one more time. Gases exchange between the blood and the lung is external respiration. Okay, and in this case, in external respiration, what do you think? Is oxygen loading or oxygen unloading? This is external respiration. Good. So it would be oxygen loading. So in other words, what you can see is that oxygen is very high here. Okay. So oxygen is going to go into the blood. We call that oxygen loading. The venous returns coming back from the right-hand side, and it goes into the lungs, part of the pulmonary circuit. CO2 is going to be very high. Okay, here. Most of the CO2 is part of the blood. It's part of the bicarbonate system. We're going to talk a little bit. And the bicarbonate system, then CO2 actually goes into the it's tied up as a bicarbonate, and the bicarbonate goes into the red blood cell. The red blood cell convert it back to CO2, and then CO2 can leave. Right. So we call that CO2 unloading. Alrighty. Yeah, right here, oxygen loading, CO2 unloading. Lungs, you can saw already, sits in the rib cage. It sits in the rib cage. You can see that. Here's the base. Here's the apex. The right-hand side has 3 lobes. Left-hand side has 2 lobes. There's cardiac notch. You can see that. So the key here that because of the positions of the heart right here, that the left primary bronchus is more of an angle than the right primary bronchus. This shows you the nice pleural membrane that's surrounding this. And the pleural membrane has 3 important functions, right? One, inside the pleural membrane, there's fluid, right? Which allows the lung to inflate or deflate to reduce friction. So one of the functions is to reduce friction. Okay. Secondly, there's a negative pressure. Okay. Negative pressure, which help to inflate the lung. Okay. Help to inflate. So in other words, if there is negative pressure here, air just tends to go out that way. So then the lung will be inflated. And then the third function is that we call that compartmentalization. Compartmentalization. And that is, it keeps this area here isolated from this side. Okay, so compartmentalizes it. Of course, you should know the pleural membrane has the visceral. The visceral is this layer here, pleural, and the parietal is the outer that next to the wall of the thoracic cavity. So the visceral is the one that is in contact with the lung. Visceral. This is a cross section of someone who's died from pneumothorax because he lives on 180th Street in the Bronx. And because there is a stab wound over here, air can enter As such, all of this is air right here, and so it prevents this lung from expanding. We call that collapsed lung, and it's compartmentalized so that on this hand side, so this is a sternum, so that's your anterior. This is your posterior over here. I mean, this is the right lung. This is the right lung, and this is the left lung. Okay, here's the heart, and you can see how there's a fluid that leads to pneumothorax. Okay, pneumothorax is it's a specific term. Also, in general, we can call this, as if you want, I didn't say, ectalectasis. Okay, ectalectasis means not fully inflated lung. In the case of air here, it can lead to pneumothorax, but sometimes you can have fluid accumulation. You can have fluid accumulation here called pleural effusion that can also prevent the lung. Sometimes you can get a lot of inflammations, etc., or even tumor that press on this that prevents the lung from inflating. That's a general term known as ectalectasis. Okay. I don't think you need to know. That's probably too much for you guys, so you don't need to know regarding that. All right, but I think I might have pneumothorax. So this is a general term, we call that pneumothorax. And you can say, oh, that's just collapsed lung. Okay. Alrighty, let me see if there are any questions. Are the lobes completely separated? Yes, there are. So one type of ectalectasis is called middle lobe syndrome. This one doesn't show it to you, but yeah, they're completely separated so that you can have if this lobe is collapsed, these will still fine. Okay. Are the lobe complete? Yeah, they are completely separated. Okay. The other thing is start knowing these 4 gas law, right? So Boyle's gas law, which is basically saying that pressure is inversely proportional to volume. Right? So in other words, you can say pressure is inversely proportional to volume. So if the volume is decreased, the pressure will increase. Okay, that's Boyle's law. Pressure a given gas is inversely proportional to its volume. That's nice. The volume of the gas is proportional to the absolute temperature. Okay, that's Charles' law, and that is just telling you that if you increases the temperature, right, you're going to increase the volume. In this case, what happened is that air is going to, bounce higher. And good things to remember, there's Charles' law related to temperature, right? So think of this as degree Celsius. Okay, that's began with the letter C. Charles began with the letter C, and degree Celsius related to temperature. Okay. Dalton's law states that if you have in the atmosphere, this is also good to know. Let's say in the atmosphere, there are 4 gases. Okay, what are these 4 gases? Most of them, like 78%, is nitrogen. Okay, 18% of that is oxygen, and then you have very small called carbon dioxide, and then water vapor. So that's usually is 4 gases. And these four gases is what you find in the atmosphere. One atmosphere, I already told you already, one atmosphere is equals to 760 millimeters of mercury. So in the old day, how do you measure the pressure? Okay, so mercury is liquid metal. So what you do is you have this column and you fill it with mercury, right? And at one atmosphere, what you're going to do is going to rise this all the way up to 760 millimeters of mercury, okay? Millimeter of mercury. So that's about 7.6 76 centimeter, so about 0.7 meter. Yeah, 0.7 meter. So about that high. That's how you do it. In the old sphygmomanometer, if you will, they usually have a mounted on the wall is the mercury column, and they bring it out to you like the cuff. They cuff it, and you crank it up, and it sees you how much mercury that goes up there. And then as they slowly release it, this number will goes down, and the area you start seeing it wavering. That's the beginning of the blood flow, and that's usually indicating systolic pressure. You read that, and you can hear that. You use a stethoscope, you can hear that, and then you continue to let it go until you can't hear anymore. So we call that diastolic pressure. And so they read the different. Up here is about 120 millimeters of mercury. Down here is 80 millimeters of mercury, if you will. Okay. So the idea here is a good number to note is that 1 atmospheric pressure is equal to 760 millimeters of mercury. Now, Dalton states that, okay, if there are 4 gases that you see here, is contributing to make this, 760 millimeters of mercury, and we know that nitrogen is 78%, right? So say nitrogen is 78%, and oxygen is about roughly 20%, so 18%. So let's say we call it 20%, right? Then that means 20% of 760 millimeters of mercury. So what's 20% of 760? 0, 12, about 152. So, okay, so 152 millimeters of mercury. This is, is contribute to oxygen. So we call this as partial pressure. Partial pressure. Okay. So Dalton's law can be written as this, so that if the pressure total, okay, 760 is equal to the partial pressure contribute to nitrogen gas, which is the percentage of that of 7 in the atmosphere, partial pressure of oxygen, right, plus partial pressure of CO2 and partial pressure of water vapor. Okay. So partial pressure of CO2 is really low in the atmosphere. Okay. But 152 is partial pressure of oxygen. Roughly around that, that's good enough. So Dalton states that the total pressure of a gas is equal to the sum of its partial pressure. So here, that's the equation for the Dalton's law. Okay. And then finally, Henry's law says that if you have an air, so if you have here's the air, and here's the water, all right? How much of that air, how much of that gas that goes in, okay, so the gas here goes into the water or from the water escape, right? It depends on two things. One is solubility, and two is partial pressure. Right? So it says right there. So at the air-water interface, the amount of gas that dissolves in the water is determined by its solubility is one and its partial pressure. Okay, and I give you an example, Henry's law. Um, so I think many of you have already, drink, carbonated water, for example, right? And then carbonated water is that we actually push CO2, we actually pump CO2 uh, into the water, right? So we're going to get our carbonated water. And then if you put that carbonated water with sugar, a little bit of caffeine, you can get Coca-Cola, something like that. Now, and let's say you have a can of Coca-Cola, you shake it up, right? And you pop it, open it up, and you see what happened. What happened is that because the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is very high, right, here in the liquid here, you will see that the CO2 will escape. Okay, it's going to fizzle out, right? And you continue to leave it for a day or 2 days, and so what happens is that the partial pressures of CO2 here is equal to the partial pressures of CO2 here, right? And no longer carbonated water, you don't see it coming out anymore. So Henry's law says that how much of the gas get into the waters depends on its solubility and partial pressure. This is very important in the context of, say, for example, of a diver, right? Normally, nitrogen is in the air, or nitrogen in the air do not get into the blood. It does not. But as a scuba diver who's breathing, scuba stands for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, right? So it's wearing a mask, it's breathing this air. As he's descending down deeper, for every 33 feet that you descend, right, the atmospheric pressure increase, okay, 2 times. So instead of 1 atmosphere, it's two atmosphere. The nitrogen is going to be increasing, such that the diver, as he's go deeper and deeper, nitrogen gas can get into the blood. Right. That's it. So he's like 150 meter, 200, 300 meter under the water, which is fine. But as he's as he go upward, you can't go really fast because then the nitrogen gas will just bubble out, right? Will bubble out. As it bubble out, it's going to get gas is trapped in his blood, and this is known as air embolism, and it moves around, and it can get into the brains, and it can get the condition known as the bend, right? Hallucination, that kind of thing. And so oftentimes the diver is told is, okay, you go up, you wait a little bit. So let's sure that the nitrogen slowly come out. And then you go up a little bit, you wait, so that the nitrogen now can go out. So you do it slowly. You don't go too fast, right? If the diver develop a pen, then you can put them in a hyperbaric chamber. And hyperbaric chamber is that we just crank up a high atmosphere, so hopefully doesn't, put the nitrogen slowly coming back into the blood, and then slowly, gradually let oxygen leave slowly, not as a bubbling out. Okay. Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break there, and then I'm going to go through and talk the rest of it later on. All right? I'm going to start.